My other friend Dan, not you, Dan, another Dan I know. I know like 4 Dans. It gets very confusing.
It's a good name.
You should rank the Dans right now.
Welcome back to Cartridge Based Radio. I'm Donald, once again joined by Brad.
Hello.
And Brad, we have a special guest today, and I don't know if you know this. I once was on a podcast called Pen Fights Gamepad.
Okay.
And old co-host Dan is here.
Hey guys.
And we are here to talk about Shaq Fu.
What?
Shaq Fu.
No, you promised we wouldn't do this. You told me we wouldn't have to talk about Shaq Fu.
Listen, you're the one who said, let's do EA month.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And you're like, I have a list of good games. And I was like, well, Shaq Fu is a game that EA made, so.
The idea was to celebrate all the cool games that came out back before EA sucked, and you're just like, oh, hey, here's Shaq Fu. Let's invalidate your idea. Let's take this whole past month and just dump it in a blender.
I don't know. There's a lot of controversy on this game. You guys might find that you get the most downloads from this episode.
No, we're not shopping.
Or maybe people hit unsubscribe. Either way.
I mean, you can't blame them. No, Shaq Fu. Brad, do you have details for us about this EA classic?
Yeah, Shaq Fu came out in 1994. It was released on the Genesis and the Super Nintendo and the Amiga and the Game Boy and a couple other systems. But, most notably the Amiga. Interestingly, it was only published by Electronic Arts on a few of those systems. So the Genesis version, yes. Super Nintendo, no. That was actually published by Ocean. Yeah, I mean, kind of a weird thing. However he pulled it off, Shaq managed to kind of have his own licensing deals where, he wasn't in NBA Jam or a lot of the other games that had the endorsement of the NBA Players Association. If you wanted to have Shaq in your game, you had to pay him separately. EA did that. They took the dump truck full of money and drove it up to Shaq's house and are like, we'd like to put you in a game. And he's like, cool. And they're like, it's going to be a fighting game.
Actually, Brad, I would like to bring a counterpoint to your argument.
Sure.
I found a little blurb on the development history of Shaq Fu.
Okay.
All right, as follows. While initially pitched as a basketball game, Shaq Fu became a fighting game after talks with Shaquille O'Neal, a self-proclaimed fan of Mortal Kombat. Delphine acknowledged that they could not compete directly with Street Fighter II from a technical perspective, instead building a game that highlighted the team's strengths as computer animators. The rotoscoping techniques that were used in the earlier release, Flashback, where actors would be filmed against a blue screen and the frames would be digitized with the help of an SGI workstation, and the artist would touch up the results using some of roughly 7,000 original character sketches as a base for defining characters. Shaquille O'Neal plays himself in the game, though many sequences were directed by a kung fu expert. Other characters were filmed by movie stuntmen and women. O'Neal also assisted with the game's dialogue.
So, here's the thing. If you've ever seen Shaq in person, or, around normal humans, Shaq is 7.5 feet tall. He's 350 pounds. Of course Shaq plays Shaq in this game. There's nothing else Shaq could play. He is a giant.
He plays the little boy you're trying to rescue.
I saw a photo once. It was Shaq standing next to The Rock, and I forget who the other guy is. Another guy who's known for... It might have been Vin Diesel.
Charles Barkley, I think.
Yeah, okay. Two guys that you think of as being big guys, they look puny next to Shaq. I mean, they look like mere mortals.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, the one Vin Diesel. I know, because... The Rock's 6 foot something. He's not a small guy, and it's crazy. It looks almost like fake. Yeah. He's huge.
All right, Dan, I have an important question for you.
Yeah.
What platform did you play the EA classic Shaq Fu on?
I played it on the Super Nintendo.
All right, I hope you're sitting because I have shocking news for you. Shaq Fu on the Super Nintendo had content cut from it. You do not have the complete story of Shaq Fu.
You don't have the full Shaq experience.
And this game goes to some weird places, such as the child you are trying to rescue, you beat the living snot out of.
What?
Like, there is a moment where Shaq is fighting a 5-year-old in this game.
That's weird.
And I don't know if you've ever seen a 7-foot guy kick a 4.5-foot tall child in the head. It's shocking.
That's weird. That was not in the classic that I played with my brothers religiously during my 6th grade year. It was good times.
You know, I gotta admit, I had trouble really staying interested in this game because it's not very good. But if you told me ahead of time that if I played it long enough, I would get to see Shaq just beat the ever-loving Shaq out of a 5-year-old child, I would have played a little bit longer and held out to see that happen.
Well, good news for you. I saved all the dialogue and text from this game so we can go through it. To answer my burning question about Shaq Fu, what is Shaq lying about? Like, we know he's in Tokyo. He says there's a charity game, but then he tells this wild story about going to another dimension. And I think it's our job to figure out what was Shaq really doing in Tokyo that he had to weave this elaborate tale.
So you're going on the assumption that Shaq is an unreliable narrator in the story of Shaq Fu, which we should probably tell people what the story of Shaq Fu is before we try to determine whether or not Shaq's making the whole thing up.
Can I read just the text leading up to when he enters the second world?
Yes.
Let's hear it.
All right. So the first picture features Shaq standing on a street. It kind of looks like Chicago. There is a sign next to him that says Kung Fu with an arrow. So it's like Kung Fu this way. And a gigantic Pepsi sign in the background.
Nice sponsorship.
And it says, it's downtown Tokyo and I'm checking out the local sites on the day of my all-star charity game. When...
Now, I have a question about this right away. Is Shaq wearing his basketball uniform while he's just, like, walking around the streets of Tokyo?
Shaq is wearing striped basketball shorts.
Yeah.
And a shirt that says Shaq.
You better believe it.
How much attention does Shaq need to draw to himself? There aren't a lot of 7.5-foot tall black men walking around Tokyo. You know, I don't think he needs to, like, wear his uniform with Shaq right across his chest. Like, he's gonna get noticed.
Yeah, he might stick out a little bit there, like twice the size of everyone else around him.
Maybe there's a big Shaq impersonating scene in Tokyo, and he just wanted to establish he is the Shaq. Okay, so he's there for his local charity game when I stumbled upon a small kung fu dojo with an old man inside, and this features the second Pepsi sign of our game.
I think it's supposed to be the same Pepsi sign, but from another angle. So, like, the purpose of the Pepsi sign isn't advertising. It's actually to try to give you a point to anchor on.
Brad, this is wrong.
Okay.
The first Pepsi sign you can see down the street.
Yeah.
The second Pepsi sign is against the building, and there's the dojo right next to it. So he turned the corner, and there's a Pepsi sign behind him and in front of him.
Okay.
So apparently Tokyo is all about Pepsi.
It's like Starbucks in Seattle.
Okay, and the third scene, we have an old Japanese man saying, "Greetings, big warrior. You are the one from the stars, I presume. I thought I'd never live to see the day." And then Shaq says, "I'm an all-star if that's what you mean. We have a game tonight. Would you like to come? It's going to be quite the battle, even though it's for charity." Then the old man says, "Oh no, young warrior. I'm too old to be fighting, but I wish you well. You must hurry now if you are to save the little boy, Nezu. That is, if you really are the magic one." "I'm not sure what you mean. I'm just sightseeing before the game. What are you talking about?" The old man says, "No time to explain. Go through this portal, find Nezu, and save him before it's too late." Okay, so that is how Shaq gets to the second world. Let's break this down.
Okay. So first of all, when there's overseas basketball things or, other sporting events or whatever, they usually don't just let the athletes wander around these foreign countries all alone because all kinds of things could go wrong.
He was just out to pick up a delicious Pepsi. He saw a Pepsi sign and then, oh, Kung Fu. But then this old guy's like, oh, you're a magic warrior man. And he's like, no, I'm a basketball star. And then the old man's like, come through this curtain in the back of my store.
Don't do that, Shaq.
And the guy's like, I don't have time to explain what's back here. Just go through this door. That is how you get murdered. So I think this part of the story might be true.
There is Pepsi. It seems pretty realistic.
Do you think he got Shaq napped?
Yes. I think he went into the back room, and then everything beyond this is the lie he has to tell.
And he's Shaq, so he would be too embarrassed to admit that he got Shaq napped. So he had to make something up, like fighting a cat lady.
Where he's suddenly a kung fu master.
No, he's a master of the fighting art of Shaquido.
Yes, that is in the opening. If you let it run long enough, he is the master of Shaquito.
So this is a game starring Shaq called Shaq Fu, where he's the master of a martial art named after him. And he wears a shirt that says Shaq on it throughout the entire game. The branding in this game is really on point. They do not want you to, for a second, to forget that Shaq is in this game.
All right, let's start going through Shaq's lie.
Okay.
So we're going through the Genesis version. So, Dan, some things are going to be out of order for you now. So the first fight you get into is with an Amazon with purple hair. And Shaq, who just entered this world, says, where is Set Ra? Your magic can't hurt me, girlfriend. So he's like, I'm just going to fire sexism off right away. And how does he know who Set Ra is? The old man never was like, the bad guy is. He just told him the kid's name. And then the lady says, my magic has never lost a match, and I'm not your girlfriend. Shaq helped with the dialogue in this game.
Shaq got friend-zoned right off he's been in this dimension for 2 seconds, and already somebody's like, I'm not your girlfriend.
So, we'll just skip to after you beat the living snot out of her. She says, I should turn you into a little frog, but since you won honorably, I'll let you pass.
Oh, that's nice.
It doesn't really say where you should go next. She's just like, I'm not gonna change you into a newt.
Yeah.
That's a strong opening for Shaq, I believe, in his lie. It's like, yeah, I fought a girl who wasn't my girlfriend, and she didn't turn me into a frog.
Yeah.
Second, you fight a prince. And Shaq says, be careful, prince. You might hurt yourself with those swords. And the prince says, my swords will make you think twice about that comment.
Oh, the dialogue is... I mean, this is Resident Evil-esque. Careful with those swords. My swords say to shut up.
My swords will make you think twice about that comment. So is that like something that Shaq left on this guy's YouTube page?
It's like some kind of improv game where they have to keep using the word swords in every sentence that they speak.
And then when you beat him, he says, you may have gotten past my swords, but the Colonel will teach you a lesson. Fool.
The Colonel.
Oh, the Colonel is amazing. He is a bald man with demon horns and a turtle shell. So Shaq says, do you know where I can find Set and the boy? And the Colonel says, grr. GRRRR exclamation point.
It's pretty impressive that he managed to advance in the army to the rank of colonel, despite being both a turtle demon and not capable of speech.
Oh, but he can talk. Next time, I'll squash you like a bug.
I don't know the Colonel. I know those first two characters, but I don't know the Colonel.
Here's another new character for you, Dan. Shaq says, you call yourself Diesel? Ha ha ha. And Diesel replies, we'll see who has the last laugh. And Diesel is wearing basically Axel's clothes from Streets of Rage.
Is this just like the WWF star of the time, Diesel, aka Kevin Nash?
Did he wear a baseball cap and a white tank top?
No. I think he just wore leather pants and a shirt that said Diesel across the front of it.
This may just be another Diesel.
Oh, that other Diesel. It's a very common name.
If you beat him, he says, I could have beat you back at home on the docks. What does that even mean? Like, if we had been standing on a dock next to water, Does he get his power from the sea?
He's actually Poseidon. Diesel Poseidon.
All right, Dan, we're getting back on track for you. You are now fighting a green guy in an orange robe. I think his name is Voodoo. The game does not tell you the characters' names when you are fighting them.
On SNES, his name was Memphis. He controlled lightning.
Yeah, okay. I played against Memphis.
So Shaq says, tell me where the boy Nazoo is before I beat it out of you. And Memphis says, yeah, right. I'll whisper it in your ear after I slap you silly.
That's a mixed message at best.
That's terrible.
Yeah, it's like, I'm going to whisper sweet nothings in your ear, Shaq, after I beat you.
As if he could even reach Shaq's face to slap him.
And then you beat him, and your courage is praiseworthy. Beware the beast, he is as lethal as he is ugly. Like, you don't tell us how ugly he is, so he might be really cute, so he's not that lethal. And here we're going back off the rails, Dan.
Yeah, here we're going off the rails. Otherwise, it's been smooth sailing up to this point.
You meet Nezoo's grandfather.
Oh, man.
And Shaq says, I'm going to rock your chair, Grandpa. And the man says, you have much to learn, young man. Shaq helped with the dialogue. I just want everyone to remember that.
It's Shaq-a-log.
To be fair, there was one time when Shaq was taunting Kobe Bryant, and he told Kobe, tell me how my ass tastes. So this seems like maybe a step up from that.
Like, did he want to know that information in earnest? He's like, I really need to know. I got some Axe body spray, and I got a little wild with it. So after you beat up the old man that was in a chair, apparently, he says, you are skilled beyond your years. Save my grandson, Nazoo. But look out, said he hypnotized him, and he will try to defeat you. And then it cuts to a cinema. Somewhere in the second world, Beast brings his skeleton soldiers to life. You literally never fight skeletons in this game.
Nobody said Beast was good at bringing them to life.
Why do you need this information? Does that just make him scarier? Like, he might have a skeleton for you to fight, but nope. And now you meet the cat lady. And Shaq says, what's up, Catwoman? Which I think is a copyright infringement. Can you tell me about the little boy, Nazoo? And she says, my name is Kaori, and I'm gonna do some serious damage to your body.
It's like they're not really even communicating. Like, Shaq is just, like, approaching strangers, like, tell me about a little boy, which is already, like, an odd situation to be in. And then their response is, I'm going to do violence to you. There might be a language barrier thing going on here.
She looks ragged in her post-fight. She says, at last, I'm freed from Setra's mind control ring. Nazoo is being held on Tombstone Island, but you must get by Setra's loyal army first. So she says he's on Tombstone Island, and you have to get past the army first.
But then what? Do you just let's find out.
I have a quick question. Is Tombstone Island guarded by Kurt Russell and Val Kilmer?
I mean, one can only wish. So you go to a lab, and there's a man, I think his name is Cyborg. And Brad, you're going to love this one.
Uh-oh.
What's up with the plastic headgear, bruh? My bionic equipment will overpower you.
You know, first of all, like, this is an entire dimension where everybody hates Shaq, which is just impossible to imagine to begin with, because Shaq is amazing. You know, on top of that, like, you just ask somebody a question, and every time they just respond with hostility and violence. Like, hey, what's up with the thing on your head? I'm going to hurt you.
So, of course, you beat him because no one can get near Shaq in this game because his leg's hitbox is 6 feet long. And he says, you were lucky, but you'll need more than luck to challenge Set. And then you go to a bridge, and you get into a fight. And Shaq says, are you Nazoo? And Nazoo is in all caps, so he says, are you Nazoo?
Shining Force syndromes come back.
And the boy says, there is no Nazoo anymore. I will fight you to the finish. And then you beat a small child. Shaq beats a small child on a bridge.
Without mercy.
Yes. And he says, "You have freed me from the Dark Master Set. Go now and face him while he is still weak." That one lady literally just said you can't get to Nizou until after you fight Set, and then 2 fights later, you find the boy. Like, were the developers confused by the order that they had themselves established 2 fights prior?
Maybe it's a twist, like, you expect all the characters to know what they're talking about, but the lady doesn't know anything. She's like, "Oh, you can't fight him till you do the other thing." She doesn't know.
Now, here's where the developers wanted to do something from the movie Predator, but they weren't allowed. You meet Beast, and Shaq says, "You are one ugly creature. Who are you?" Okay,
so I know he's been getting attacked constantly, and it's probably put him in a bad mood. That is not a nice way to greet somebody. Like, if you met somebody for the first time, you just walked up and you said that, I mean, yeah, they'd probably try to fight you.
"What's up, Uggo? I'm gonna kick you with my fly kicks."
But then you say, "Who are you?" You're asking information, and he replies, "I am Beast, Set Ra's greatest servant. I will beat you senseless." If someone called you ugly, you then have the right to attempt to beat them senseless. But then you beat him senseless.
Yeah.
"I will travel through time to fight you again someday. Set Ra will not let you take the boy. You will never succeed. You already took the boy." Shaq could have gone home after that one and been like, "Peace." Of course, the old man never told him how to get back home.
I'd like to think that Shaq rescued this little boy, and then he just was looking around. He's like, "Whoa, check out that ugly dude. I'm going to go harass him about being ugly."
And then you are treated to a cinema of a coffin opening and a man in yellow pajamas laying in it. Think there's supposed to be bandages. And then you meet Set Ra.
Oh, after all this buildup.
Who is wearing football pads.
Yeah, pretty much made of metal. And there's spikes on the shoulder blades.
And Shaq says, mind you, Shaq already has the boy. "Hand over the boy, mommy, man, or I'll unravel you."
Ooh, he just got shacked.
Just shacking all over the place. "I am Set Ra. You should have never come this far. After I beat you, I will wreak havoc upon the human race."
Oh no, Shaq has to save the world now.
It's real. Dan, you are in for a treat. Cut from the Super Nintendo version. Set Ra has a reply after you beat him.
Oh.
So here you go. "You are a man of great power, but mark my words, I'll be back."
Ooh, Shaq Fu 2.
So Shaq returns to the real world, and he has the boy. He says, "Thanks, Shaq. You just saved my life." Mind you, Shaq beat the living crap out of that little boy.
That's how he saved him.
And then Shaq, still wearing his Shaq jersey, but it looks like everyone else is wearing a Shaq jersey on the basketball team also. So apparently Shaq owns an international all-star basketball team.
Well, it's a charity game, so, they're probably the Harlem Shaq Trotters.
There you go.
So he is running up, and it looks like they flipped a sprite because this guy I think is supposed to be wearing a 12 jersey, but it's not a 12. He is saying, "Sorry I'm late, boys. Let's just say I had to fight some traffic to get here."
Oh, Shaq.
So apparently, beating people senseless is what he thinks traffic is.
Shaq and his Shaqisms.
Then Beast is on the basketball court.
Oh, no.
So apparently this just slides right into Space Jam territory. And Shaq says, "Oh no, not you again. I hope you play hoops better than you fight, Beast." And that's how this stupid game ends.
It's just Sean Kemp. He's like, "Hey, you invited me to this charity basketball game."
All right, so we have now experienced the complete story that Shaq told somebody about why he was missing for a time while in Tokyo. So let's figure this out.
I'm just glad that Shaq made it to the game at all, because probably he's the only celebrity at this charity basketball game. So if he had no-showed it and all these people just showed up and it's like just a bunch of like minor league basketball players playing basketball badly, that probably wouldn't have been a great charity event.
And now the Beast is there, so it's going to be like Harlem Globetrotters with a 9-foot-tall demon on the court.
I mean, I'm sure the demon discovered playing basketball is much better than working for Set Ra. Maybe getting beat by Shaq was the best experience of his life. Everyone seemed pretty okay with getting beat up by Shaq.
So did all of them get freed from Set Ra's power that they held over him, or just a couple?
I think the little boy and the cat lady.
That would describe their horrific dialogue, but no one else has a good excuse. So.
And I mean, one guy wants to whisper in Shaq's ear. What happened in that back room that is so tragic? This is the story Shaq had to come up with. Like, was he missing fingernails when he arrived at the game? Like, Shaq, what happened to your fingernails? I got into a fight in another dimension.
I think the big takeaway from this is, if you pay Shaq a whole bunch of money to be in a game that you're making, don't let Shaq have creative control. You know, like somebody from EA comes up to him and they're just like, yeah, we want to make a basketball game that's going to be like Shaq basketball. And he's like, no, you know what? I want to do a fighting game where I beat up a small child.
Can you make this dream come true for me?
Or the people at the video game place were trying to say, you know, Shaq, we need to work on this dialogue. And then they look up at him and they're like, never mind.
Yeah, that's good. That would be intimidating to tell Shaq what he wrote is just borderline second grade level of wit and structure. I mean, I'm sure Shaq is a very smart man. He just might not be a writer.
Yeah, you know, his talents are elsewhere.
I can write a sentence, but I cannot slam dunk a basketball.
No, or freestyle a rap.
That brings us to another point about this game. He did some promotional work for it, where he released an album. It's called Shaq Fu.
Oh, man.
You know, Shaq has this advantage of, whenever he records something, it's never gonna live up to, you know, the work that he contributed to Can We Rock? What's Up, Doc? Which, you know, is probably the highlight of his music career.
I feel bad for the 40 people who worked on this game, because I did look that up. It's 40 people. They had to be in a tough spot, just coming off Flashback, and then EA drops this in their lap.
You know, the person that I've always had the most admiration for is whoever wrote the story for this game, because, you know, whether it was a different game that they already had started developing that they had to work Shaq into, or if it was a whole new thing, at some point somebody's boss came to them and said, we're going to make a fighting game about Shaq. We need you to write a story for this, and it needs to make sense. No thing I've ever done in my professional career has ever been anywhere near as challenging as that must have been.
Is that one of those situations where you open the drawer where you hide your bourbon and just slowly take off the lid and just start chugging? She's like, oh, my career's over. This is it. This was the moment.
That's one of those days where you're hitting the Skittles before 9:30 in the morning. It's just like, it's going to be one of those days. I'm going to make a trip down to the candy machine.
After the guy left the room after telling that, he's sitting there staring blankly at the wall, not knowing what to do. And the guy popped his head back in and is like, oh, and Shaq wants to help you write the dialogue.
It's just like, it's the boss from Office Space. He just comes in, he's like, yeah, so we're going to make a fighting game about Shaq, so if you could write the dialogue for that, that would be great. Shaq will be over to help you in a few minutes.
And you know, he's just sitting there, he's like, what would you say in this situation, Shaq? And he doesn't want to know. But then Shaq tells him, and Shaq's like, write that down. I want to make sure this is in the game when I play it. Yeah, okay.
I mean, Shaq played in the NBA for like 15 years, probably. I'm sure there's a lot of trash talk going on. It puts everything in a whole new perspective if, like, him and another NBA player are going after each other, like, under the hoop, and he's just like, better watch yourself with those swords or you're gonna cut yourself.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Maybe that's why you'd always see people running away from Shaq and looking back over their shoulder. They weren't afraid. They're like, what just happened to me right in that moment?
Can I please guard someone else? He keeps whispering weird stuff in my ear and then slapping me.
All the dialogue is just like conversations that Shaq relayed from memory from NBA games.
Yeah. Let me tell you this. It's a real story. We've got to put this in the game.
You said that to someone? Really? Yeah. So, obviously, something happened to Shaq in that Kung Fu store. We may never know.
We don't have to.
Yeah, or maybe if you're in Japan, do not mix Pepsi with Kung Fu. Bad things can happen. Don't follow those signs.
If you see Pepsi Kung Fu, run. But we probably should talk about gameplay just a little bit, since we brought Dan on. Well, there's some things about this gameplay that needs to be talked about. Mainly, Shaq is invincible.
Yeah, he's huge, far reach.
If you play this with your friends and they pick Shaq, you know your friend is awful and you should never deal with them again. So Shaq has a shield. Shaq has like 3 projectiles. Shaq has a dragon upper punch from Street Fighter. And Shaq can fly across the screen with his leg out like Kung Lao style.
Forgot about that.
And if you have your fists up to block him, he just goes right through that because he's Shaq.
Yeah.
So the game is not challenging to get to the end because you can just spam kick and Shaq will just rock everyone to death. So they didn't even balance this game. They balanced it in the way of Shaq.
Right.
But, like, Dan, when you played this game, was there like a house rule of no one can be Shaq?
So for us, I was in 6th grade. I was the oldest. I had 2 younger brothers that were pretty close in age. None of us would ever be Shaq because the other ones are pretty well balanced. There were some cool things about it. If you learn the special moves, you could hit someone with lightning from across the screen. You could do all kinds of cool moves. The background art was pretty awesome. The music was pretty moody. Also, there was a tournament mode, which was kind of cool. You could have up to 8 people enter it, and everyone picks their own player, and then it just 2 people fight, and whoever wins goes on. So that was kind of cool for like a party game.
Okay, but for that to work, you have to have 8 people in one place that all want to play Shaq Fu. And mathematically, that's impossible.
Yes, that's true.
If you do, you have 8 sad people in a room.
Or Shaq has cloned himself 8 times, and they're all going to pick Shaq.
So, when I was in 6th grade, I don't know why we got this game, but if you just forget Shaq is in it, and you play as the other characters, and it's like a cool, weird Street Fighter-esque sort of game, the gameplay is actually pretty fast, and you can even go into the options and change it to be even faster, so it's a little more intense. And once you really learn the moves, if you just kind of try and punch and kick, this game really sucks. If you play as Shaq through the story mode, it's an awful game. But if you notice, when you start, it's selected as dual mode instead of story mode. So yeah, that's all we ever did. We just played it like Street Fighter, and we didn't ever choose Shaq because he was just kind of a lame character. So to play it against my brothers a lot was actually pretty fun. But I do recognize it's an awful game. But we all came to love some of those, like the wizard character, and I thought the art was pretty good and the music was pretty cool. But I've never met another person other than my brothers who does not just hate that game and just look at me like, I thought I knew you, Dan, but now that I know you liked Shaq Fu, I'm a little iffy on you. They stop coming out. I invite them over. They don't come anymore. So.
You should stop asking them to play Shaq Fu in 2018.
Yeah. You made it. I still have my Super Nintendo. Let's do this.
I'm going to slap you silly and then whisper things in your ear. I'm going home. I have a feeling when they told them it's going to be a fighting game, this company had a fighting game in mind with like character designs and stuff. And then they were tasked with putting Shaq into something that could have, because you're right, the art is good. Like the animation in this game, like the guys who made Flashback know how to animate things. It's got smooth animation. It's got nice background art. But it's Shaq Fu.
Yes, it is Shaq Fu.
Someone shacked all over this game.
I'm not 100% sure if the money and the whatever it took to get Shaq to be in a game, if that came from the publisher, and then they had to pick a developer to make their Shaquille O'Neal fighting game for them. I mean, that's an odd choice to be like, well, these guys made Flashback. I bet they'd be awesome at this. That's a very different type of game.
Well, first EA pitched him a basketball game by the guys who made Flashback.
Yeah, it just really wanted Shaq to work with the people that made Flashback.
You guys, we got Pepsi and we got Shaq. Let's do this.
Is this the point where EA started not knowing how to use the development houses they purchased?
In terms of us doing EA month, this is probably kind of like a good one for us to have picked. This represents a moment where EA kind of stopped knowing what the hell they were doing. It's like they bought the rights to have Shaq in a game, and they bought the studio that made Flashback, and they just had these two brand new toys, and they're like, well, we got to play with them together. It doesn't matter if that makes sense.
It's like you got your G.I. Joe and your Star Wars action figures, and you're like, Luke just chopped off Lady J's arm, like Luke does. It's literally what happened with this game. Just, wow, It's a complete mess from top to bottom.
It is. I still love this game, though. But not when you play Shaq Fu and not in story mode. That dialogue was atrocious.
I think it's fantastic that, the whole point of making this game was to have a game with Shaq in it. And the only way that this game's any fun to play and is playable is if no one uses Shaq.
Begrudgingly, it's a game with Shaq in it, but the good part of the game... So the developer's like, people are going to figure this out. They're going to figure out that you can play this game as a game as long as you don't do the thing that they forced us to do.
There's got to be a reason it starts on dual mode. Somehow they knew story mode was awful. So they're like, well, they'll just press start because they're going to want to play it. And then, what's this? Then they'll realize when they see the story mode how bad it is. But maybe we can get them at first with this, weird magic creature Street Fighter type of rip-off game.
It would be like if Street Fighter 2 had a story mode and you could only play through it as E Honda.
Yeah.
It's like, the worst character. Come on. I wanted to be Ryu.
You can pick E Honda or Blanca.
Aww.
What even is this game?
I never played really in story mode. I think I did, but I would just get sick of being Shaq.
Yeah.
And he was not my favorite, so yeah.
I kind of think that maybe they had already made a fighting game and they had balanced it all out and they had it, kind of competent. And then they had to add Shaq to it and they didn't have a lot of time. So they're like, boss comes up, he's like, so Shaq in the game now? And they're like, yeah, but we haven't really balanced it yet. So it doesn't really work. And they're just like, is Shaq too powerful or too weak? Oh, he's way overpowered. Yeah, that's fine.
Ship it.
Shaq's not going to complain about that.
Could you make him a bit more powerful? Just keep cranking it up.
Or they had Shaq. Shaq insisted on playtesting it, and every time he said, yo, I need to be more powerful.
Shaq just sucks at fighting games, and they had to keep, boosting him up so that he could finally beat it. Just give him a shield.
When he pushes down, make a bubble go around him that's impenetrable.
Because now Shaq knows magic, too, all of a sudden.
Yeah, he went through the curtain in the back room. We're assuming he knew Shaquito before he went in there.
We'll just go with that.
The guy was like, you're the one of prophecy, and Shaq's like, no, I'm in a charity basketball game. And does this mean that Shaq knows Japanese? Or did the store owner know English?
Probably a touristy area.
Translation issues would explain a lot of how this all happened.
The man's like, don't go in my back room, and Shaq's like, yo, what's back here?
I can't shake the feeling of Shaq just hanging around the developers' offices the entire time they're making this game. And he's, how's it going? Is it done yet? And maybe not all the time, but every Thursday, Shaq swings by and all the programmers are just like, oh God, Shaq's here again. He's wearing that ridiculous checkered Sherlock Holmes hat he had in that music video, and he just keeps asking if we've added more powers to him yet.
Wait, that's the hat that Diesel's wearing.
Oh, okay. So we've solved that mystery. Diesel is just Shaq from the What's Up Doc video.
No, it's got to be a backup dancer who went to this other realm to fight Shaq after being in that video. It's like, I'm coming for you, Shaq. If only we had this fight on a dock. The water would have got your shoes wet and you would have slipped.
Yeah, there's another conversation that came from a basketball game. It's just Karl Malone said if we had been playing on the docks instead of a basketball court, man, he would have taken me to school.
He said he would have drowned me in the ocean and I would be dead. He's such a joker. I'm pretty sure at this point in history, when this was made, Shaq did have a Pepsi deal. Because he was a Pepsi spokesman for a long time.
Yeah, he had that commercial where he said, "Don't fake the funk on a nasty dunk," which somehow that line of dialogue didn't make it into this game.
Oh, gold.
It sounds like he wrote that line of dialogue, too.
Yeah, now we know his writing style. We know his authorial voice.
Yeah, at the time, this was probably while he was playing for the Orlando Magic, so that kind of explains why the old man is like, "Are you the Magic one?" And then Shaq's like, "Oh, no, because we didn't get the license for that. we can't actually say what NBA team I play for." If he had been on Utah, the old man would have been like, "I bet you're good at jazz." And he's like, "No, I'm not. I'm good at Shaq Fu."
You're probably good at lakes. No. Yeah, it's so Shaq probably was like at a meeting with Pepsi and he's like, "Hey, I'm getting my own video game." And they're like, "You're contractually obligated to us. You want to be in my game?" "Yeah, we do." They're all giving high fives. "We're in a video game."
Little did they know.
Speaking of Final Fight, we probably should end with the glorious news that in 2015, Shaq Fu, The Legend Returns, made its funding goal on Indiegogo.
Oh, man. Here, let me just do a little promo movie voice for that. Shaq Fu, a legend reborn.
Thank you. That does not make what this game looks like any better. So it's Final Fight, but you're Shaq.
I just watched the video for that, promoting it, and like half the video is them apologizing for the original game, and Shaq saying, just forget that one happened.
Now, is this like, prime basketball age Shaq, or is this like Shaq now, where he's like in his 40s and has been retired for a long time and hosts a pregame show with Charles Barkley? Like, is this just going to be like Shaq in a suit and kind of out of shape, beating people up as he walks down the street? Or
I gotta get to the sports desk. No, this is probably when Shaq gets real drunk. This is how Shaq sees himself in the mirror. It's that version of Shaq. He's not in a fantasy land anymore. He's just beating people up at random. But this game in March will be funded 4 years ago. And so far, the most progress they made is just saying it's not 360 PS3 anymore. It's Xbox One, PS4, and Wii U. And then recently, we've given up on the Wii U version. We're going to put it on the Switch. And people are like, can we see video of it in action? No. This developer who's supposed to be making it released a different game recently. And people are like, what about the game we gave you money for? And like, we totally didn't use that money to make this other game. It was like $146,000. And Shaq's like, I need you to fund my my fighting game. Shaq doesn't have $146,000 laying around to make this dream come true. Do you think he called the guys who made Shaq Fu and he's like, hey, I want to make a game, and they just threw their phone out of a moving car? I guess that's Shaq Fu. Some people love it for the non-Shaq parts of it. The rest of us who didn't have friends and family to play with just played the Shaq version and were like, take me back to Blockbuster right now. I mean, in a roundabout way, Shaq Fu's probably to blame for the closing of Blockbusters around the world. If I put that out there, could it become the reason? I don't know. Dan, any final thoughts on Shaq Fu?
Oh, like I said, it's true. If you play as Shaq or you play the story mode, it's just awful. But if you learn the cool secret moves and powers of the other characters, and you can convince someone to play with you as someone else that's not Shaq, it's pretty cool.
Brad, final thoughts on Shaq Fu or your favorite recipes?
Our discussion about Shaq Fu kind of gives us a segue to something that we can tell our listeners about that is a really good cause that they can get behind and help support. And that is that if you go to ShaqFu.com, it's actually being run by an organization who their mission is to buy up all the copies of Shaq Fu that are still out in the world and destroy them. So, if you're looking for a good charity to kind kind of throw your support behind, maybe give them a donation or something. It's a really good cause. It's ridding the world of the plague known as Shaq Fu. This is a real thing. ShaqFu.com. Check it out.
I will put that link in the description so you can get there as quickly as possible to help. I don't want to say saints, so let's just say brave human beings on their quest. A crusade, if you will. I don't really have anything to say about Shaq Fu because I had to read that story to you guys, and I feel like I should go read some classic literature to have a cleanse. That's going to do it for Shaq Fu, and that's going to close out our EA month. We really went out on top there, Brad.
Yeah, on that massive disappointment. Thus ends EA month.
Congratulations, guys.
Last week we were just baffled by how amazing Road Rash looked and ran.
Yeah.
And then we just stepped right into this big pile of Shaq. So I'm Donald. That was Brad. And thank you so much for joining us, Dan, and bringing some perspective into how Shaq Fu can be fun.
It was a pleasure, but it's still an awful game.
Still an awful game. We will see you next week.
Okay, so there's a sentence that we might need to